We're all fascinated by the legendary Hattori Hanzo katanas from Kill Bill and the silent honor of Samurai Jack, right? At least once, we've all imagined ourselves in a life filled with that cool armor. But could we truly survive even a single day in that era, under those rules? Got no service on your phone again. Stop cursing the carrier. The problem isn't the carrier. It's the era. You've just opened your eyes. You are no longer in 2025, but in feudal Japan, ruled ruthlessly by samurai and razor-sharp codes. The freedoms you consider normal could instantly become your death warrant in this. Dystopian etiquette guide. Forget changing careers. In this time, expressing an opinion, criticizing your lord's poorly written haiku, or giving a sideways glance to a superior are candidates for instantaneous decapitation or a promotion to corpse. Sitting incorrectly was a matter of life and death. Even as a samurai, you had to master approximately 10,000 ways to sit properly in front of your lord, despite your knees screaming in protest. If you're a merchant and wealthy, it's an insult. You had to hide all your luxury, even your expensive silk inner lining, because making money without labor is considered morally shady. The simplest act. You have 3 seconds to size up the approaching person. If your bow angle 15, 30, or 45 degrees is wrong, it's an insult and social suicide. And what was permitted? You were only permitted to live on the condition that you abide by your birth class's rules and be ready to commit ritual suicide seppuku to preserve honor upon making a mistake. In this video, we take a regular person from today and drop them into the middle of feudal Japan's strictest, most absurd rules. Let's see if you could survive even a single day in this world.
Tonight, we're diving headfirst into the elegant, disciplined, and often brutally unforgiving world of feudal Japan. Forget your romantic notions of serene gardens and quiet contemplation. This is a place of samurai honor, strict codes, and consequences so sharp they could slice a silk kimono in half just by looking at it. It's the land of cherry blossoms, beautiful poetry, and a daily routine so demanding it would absolutely break most of us by lunchtime. Seriously, your average feudal Japanese farmer had a better work ethic than your most dedicated tech startup founder, and they were fueled by rice gruel and existential dread. Before we get too comfortable, and by comfortable, I mean preparing for a deep, soul-crushing dive into historical misery, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're just here for the historical gossip and the occasional dark joke, that's fine too. Just don't tell the ancestors. And please, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Probably from a place where you can choose your own career path and aren't constantly worried about being executed for a minor social faux pas. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, or perhaps just the sound of your own quiet, mounting dread, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In feudal Japan, you don't wake up and choose your path. That's a modern luxury, a concept as alien as a smartphone or a decent cup of coffee. No, you wake up and your path has already been chosen for you. It was decided by birth, by blood, and by people who've been dead for 6 generations, and frankly, should have minded their own business. Your role in society isn't a suggestion you can politely decline. It's a non-negotiable life sentence. There is no gap year. There is no finding yourself. There is only the rigid, 4-tiered social structure, and you are firmly glued to your assigned spot. Were you born into a samurai family? Lucky you. You're now responsible for the blade, the bow, and approximately 10,000 ways to sit properly in front of your lord without your knees screaming in protest. Your life is one long, excruciating lesson in posture and the art of looking perpetually serious. Born a peasant? Congratulations. You'll be spending the next 40 years ankle-deep in mud, and your children will too. And their children, forever. There is no resume. There is no start-your-own-business seminar. You are either a samurai, a peasant, an artisan, or a merchant. And once you're placed, you stay there. Trying to jump ranks isn't just frowned upon. It's punishable by a swift, sharp, and very public end. You don't climb the ladder in feudal Japan. You bow to it, repeatedly. The social structure, known as Shi-Nō-Kō-Shō, is a masterpiece of historical rigidity, designed to ensure that everyone knew exactly who they could condescend to and who could have them executed. At the top, we have the samurai, They are the warrior class, the only ones legally allowed to carry the daisho, the paired long and short swords. They are the ultimate status symbol, the historical equivalent of having a black card and a private jet. But here's the catch. Their entire existence is a tightrope walk over a pit of dishonor. They live in constant paralyzing fear of disrespecting their lord, their ancestors, their tailor, or their sword, by accidentally sneezing at the wrong time. A single, ill-timed achoo could be interpreted as a sign of weakness, a lack of discipline, or worse, a subtle critique of the daimyo's new haiku. Their honor is a beautiful, fragile thing, constantly demanding blood sacrifice. They are the ultimate paradox, the most powerful class, yet the one with the highest anxiety levels. They are the only ones who can kill a commoner for disrespect, but they are also the only ones expected to commit ritual suicide, seppuku, if they spill their tea incorrectly. It's a high-risk, high-reward lifestyle, where the reward is mostly just not dying today. Just below the samurai are the peasants. They are the farmers. They are the foundation of the entire economy, the reason the samurai eat, and the person everyone forgets exists until tax season. They are literally the most important people in the country. Yet they are treated like dirt, which is fitting, as they spend all their time in it. Their life is a combination of dirt, sweat, back pain, and government-mandated rice delivery. They are taxed so hard on their rice that if they cough up too much, they starve. If they hide some to survive, that's treason. Heads roll often. Their existence is a relentless cycle of planting, weeding, and hoping a bandit raid doesn't happen today. And their reward for feeding the nation? Being legally forbidden from leaving their village. They are, in effect, rice-based prisoners with seasonal ankle rot. Next up are the artisans. These are the craftsmen, the potters, the swordsmiths, the people who make all the beautiful, elegant things that make feudal Japan look so good in history books. They are ranked above the merchants because they create something tangible, something that requires honest labor. Their life is marginally better than the peasants, but still fraught with peril. Imagine spending 6 months perfecting a lacquer box, only for a bored samurai to declare it insufficiently poetic and demand you start over. Their work is judged by the highest standards, and their pay is often a fraction of the final value. They are the unsung heroes of aesthetics, constantly battling the twin demons of perfectionism and the samurai's fickle taste. At the bottom of the Shi-Nō-Kō-Shō pyramid are the merchants. This is where things get truly absurd. They have the coin. They are the ones with the actual liquid wealth. But in feudal Japan, they are near the bottom. Why? Because they make money without labor, which is considered morally shady. Yes, you are literally too efficient to be respected. The merchant is the historical equivalent of a stockbroker being judged by a subsistence farmer. They are the necessary evil. The people who keep the economy moving but are constantly reminded that their wealth is unclean. They are experts at looking just respectable enough not to get noticed by a bored samurai on patrol, yet rich enough to afford the silk they're not supposed to wear. It's a delicate, profitable, and deeply humiliating existence. And then, we haven't even gotten to the ETA, the untouchables. These are the people who deal with death. The messy, necessary parts of life that everyone else pretends don't exist. Butchers, executioners, leather workers. Society needs them. Someone has to deal with the dead cows and the disgraced samurai. But they are treated as if they don't exist. They are like ghosts with jobs. Important jobs, but ghosts nonetheless. They are the ultimate social pariahs, performing essential services while being constantly reminded of their spiritual impurity. It's a level of social awkwardness that transcends mere class structure. Whatever your class, your freedom ends where your father's opinion begins. You'll marry who you're told, obey whom you must, and thank the heavens if you're allowed to learn poetry. You are born assigned a costume and a script and shoved onto the stage of society whether you want to perform or not. It is elegant, poetic, and crushingly inescapable. And that, my friends, is all before you've had breakfast. You might think that life in feudal Japan was all grit, grime, and historical authenticity that smelled faintly of unwashed wool and stale fish. You would be wrong. Japan took cleanliness seriously. Painfully seriously. In fact, it was practically a religion. A daily, freezing ritual that served as a constant low-grade character test. This sounds lovely, a culture that values purity, until you experience it in the dead of winter. The daily routine begins not in a cozy, tiled bathroom with a warm towel and cucumber soap, but at a stone basin filled with water fetched from a well or stream. And let's be clear, this water is not lukewarm. It is ice cold. There is no heating. There is no negotiating with the water. You splash your face and arms, shivering so violently that you suspect the ancestors are personally punishing you for the audacity of having paws instead of perfectly manicured hands. Soap? Only if you were rich enough to afford the luxury. And even then, it was typically made from ash or rice bran and smelled less like fresh citrus and more like something a monk invented as a test of character and a subtle form of self-flagellation. The entire process was less about feeling refreshed and more about proving, through sheer teeth-chattering endurance, that you were spiritually worthy of facing the day. In rural areas, the local bathhouse, sento or ofuro, if you were lucky enough to have one, became the beating heart of hygiene. It was a communal center, heated by firewood and filled with the entire village. And by communal, we mean absolutely no privacy whatsoever. This was the ultimate social anxiety test. Imagine this. You are completely naked, scrubbing down next to your neighbor, your boss, your future in-laws, and maybe the landlord who just raised your rice tax. All of you are silent, pretending this isn't the most awkward moment of your entire existence. You scrub first, then you soak. Cleanliness is sacred. Dirtying the bathwater? That's not just a faux pas, it's social suicide. You'd rather commit seppuku than be the person who left a ring of scum in the communal tub. If you weren't near a bathhouse, then you washed what you could, when you could. You cleaned your teeth with salt or a twig, the historical equivalent of a toothbrush that tasted like a mistake. Your nails were kept neat. Your clothes were regularly aired. You did this not because it was trendy, but because being unclean was seen as shameful, spiritually and socially. It was a visible sign of a lack of discipline, and in a society built on discipline, that was a fatal flaw. If you were a samurai, multiply the pressure by 1,000. Your lord might inspect you head to toe at any time. Dirty fingernails? Dishonor. A wrinkled robe? Disrespect. Too much body odor during a deep, respectful bow? You might not get back up again. The samurai had to be perpetually ready for war, but also perpetually ready for a surprise inspection by a daimyo with an overly sensitive nose. Women, of course, had it even worse. They were expected to smell like cherry blossoms and discipline. Bathing was ritualized. Skincare was practiced with military precision, and hair was maintained in elaborate styles that took hours to construct. All this, just so you could work a rice mortar and still look dignified doing it. The goal was to achieve a state of aesthetic perfection that suggested you were entirely above the messy business of being human. So yes, feudal Japan was clean. Very clean. But it came at a price. Freezing water, endless grooming, and the constant soul-shrinking awareness that someone was definitely judging your foot hygiene. It was a daily existential crisis wrapped in a damp, cold towel. Let's say you were born into the warrior class, the samurai. Sounds cool, right? Fancy swords, silk robes, poetic sword fights under cherry blossoms. Now, let's talk about the fine print. Being a samurai in feudal Japan isn't about swinging a katana and shouting for honor. It's about never, ever screwing up. It's a life lived under a microscope, where the smallest mistake can lead to the most dramatic and often fatal consequences. The entire framework of your life is governed by Bushido, the way of the warrior. This is a code of conduct so strict, so demanding, that even your ancestors are nervous. It's not a suggestion. It's a spiritual and social straitjacket. You don't live for yourself. You live for your daimyo, your lord. His word is law. His moods are weather patterns. And your job is to serve him with such loyalty that you'd rather die horribly than disappoint him mildly. No pressure. In the world of the samurai, dishonor is the boogeyman under the bed, the shadow in the corner, the thing that can end your career faster than a bad performance review. And it is everywhere. Disobedience, dishonor. Failure, dishonor. Raising your voice inappropriately, dishonor. Looking at the wrong person sideways during a tea ceremony, you guessed it, dishonor. Accidentally wearing the wrong shade of indigo on a Tuesday? Probably dishonor. Dishonor isn't something you walk off with a shrug in a therapy session. It's something you're expected to atone for, usually with your own intestines. That's not a metaphor. That's seppuku, the ritual suicide expected of a disgraced samurai. You kneel, pull out a short blade, tanto, and, well, let's just say it's a very dramatic way to preserve your dignity. This wasn't rare. It was a respected, even celebrated way to preserve dignity and family name. Mess up badly enough, and your lord might give you a short blade and a quiet room and say, you know what to do. It was the ultimate performance review. Either you were perfect, or you were perfectly dead. On top of the existential dread of Bushido, samurai were expected to train constantly. Their to-do list was exhausting. Swordsmanship, kenjutsu, must be flawless. Your sword is your soul, and your soul must be sharp. Archery, kyudo, must be precise. Missing the target is a metaphor for missing the point of your entire existence. Horseback riding, bajutsu, must be graceful. Falling off is a public display of your lack of control. Strategy, gunbai, must be brilliant. Losing a battle is not an option. Calligraphy, shodo, must be elegant. Your handwriting is a window into your soul, and your soul must be beautiful. Poetry, haiku, must be profound. A poorly constructed haiku could suggest a lack of spiritual depth. All this, while maintaining perfect posture and the expression of a man who's never known joy, just a deep, abiding sense of obligation. Laughing too loud, unrefined. Showing fear, weakness. Getting emotional, shameful. Your clothes are precise, your sword must be spotless, and your conduct must be so honorable it makes other people uncomfortable. And if you ever raise your sword in anger without cause, insult a superior, or lose a duel, you don't just lose. You lose everything. Being a samurai isn't about glory. It's about discipline, silence, and surviving each day without blinking wrong. So yes, you look good in armor, but you're one eyebrow twitch away from existential catastrophe. So you weren't born a samurai. No sword, no poetry, no chance of dramatic ritual disembowelment. That's the good news. The bad news? You're a peasant, which means your entire existence is a combination of dirt, sweat, back pain, and government-mandated rice delivery. You are the farmer, the person who literally keeps the entire elegant, poetic, and brutal system running. You wake up with the sun, not because you're one with nature, but because the land tax doesn't pay itself. And also, your thatched hut has no doors, no windows, and someone's goat just walked across your bed mat. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is a bowl of rice porridge and a side of last week's pickled something. If you're unlucky, it's pretend you're not hungry with a splash of river water. Then it's off to the rice fields, which sound peaceful in travel documentaries, but are in reality mud pits designed to break your soul slowly over 12 hours. You plant, you weed, you hope a bandit raid doesn't happen today, and when the sun goes down, you limp home, only to discover that one of your oxen is missing, and the village headman would like to speak with you about your grain shortfall. The taxes are relentless. You don't get paid in coins, you pay them with rice. This is the ultimate historical irony. You grow the food, but you don't get to eat it until the government has taken its cut. Your family eats what's left, which isn't much, especially if the harvest was bad, or if your lord's nephew accidentally rode a horse through your plot during a military drill. The tax system was a masterpiece of calculated cruelty. It was designed to keep you just above starvation, ensuring you had enough energy to work, but not enough to rebel. If you had a good harvest, the tax collector would simply raise the quota next year. If you had a bad harvest, well, that was your problem. Hiding even a small amount of rice to feed your starving children was considered treason, punishable by death. The tax collector was not a bureaucrat. He was a grim reaper with a ledger. Want to complain? That's adorable. You can't. Talking back gets you whipped, exiled, or promoted to corpse. If you're really lucky, you might become a village elder, which means people still don't listen to you. But now ask for your advice right before ignoring it, and remember, you're legally not allowed to leave your village without permission. You are, in effect, a rice-based prisoner with seasonal ankle rot. Your entire world is the distance between your hut and your field. Festivals? There are some. You get drunk on week-old sake, dance in a circle, and try not to think about how planting season starts again in 4 days. You are the foundation of the economy, the reason the samurai eat, and the person everyone forgets exists. And no, you do not get a day off, because feudal Japan believes in hard work, generational suffering, and keeping expectations extremely, extremely low. You're hungry. Of course you are. You've been tilling, planting, sweating, and politely not dying since sunrise. Time to eat. But in feudal Japan, meals aren't about indulgence. They're about survival, simplicity, and the desperate hope that you won't choke on a fishbone in front of your in-laws. If you're a peasant, your diet is a monotonous, soul-crushing loop of rice. Rice for breakfast, rice for lunch, rice for dinner. If you're lucky, it's actual rice. If you're not, it's barley pretending to be rice, or millet, or whatever grain the tax collector decided wasn't worthy of the daimyo's table. You might get a turnip or two, some pickled radish if the gods are in a good mood. Meat? That's for the daimyo, or for that one chicken that looked at you funny and mysteriously disappeared during a particularly lean week. Fish sometimes, but it's dried, salted, and sharp enough to file your teeth. Soup? Usually miso, if you can call hot salt water with 2 floating leaves soup. It's flavorful. Yes, in the same way that seawater is hydrating. Now, if you're a samurai, you do get better food. But you also eat last, after your lord, his guests, and anyone he feels like impressing. That means cold rice, cold soup, and the eternal joy of watching other people eat while pretending you're deeply honored to wait. Your meal is a performance of patience and humility, a side dish of psychological warfare. Also, everything is seasonal, not because it's trendy or farm to table, but because there's no refrigeration, no global supply chain, and if you don't harvest it yourself, it probably doesn't exist. So, when it's winter, that's just nature's way of suggesting fasting, and heaven forbid you get food poisoning. Medical care is optimistic. The local remedy is, lie down and think about your ancestors. You'll either get better or become one of them. It's a 50-50 chance, which is better odds than winning a duel against a master swordsman. Food theft is a serious crime. Steal a bowl of rice, and you're not getting a slap on the wrist. You're getting a public display of why we don't touch the daimyo's daikon.tea. It's around, but not like you're imagining. The tea ceremony is a complex performance that's more about posture, etiquette, and existential humility than actually quenching thirst. So, yes, meals are sacred, quiet, and respectful, but mostly they're bland, small, and contain at least one crunchy mystery item. And no, you can't complain. Not unless you want your next meal served through your nose. So you've just finished your modest bowl of crunchy, maybe fish soup. Someone says something absurd. Maybe your lord mumbles a bad haiku. Maybe your village elder misquotes a proverb. Maybe your neighbor insists his cow can predict the weather. And for one reckless, foolish moment, you think about correcting them. Don't. In feudal Japan, your opinion is a liability. Free speech is not a concept. It's a fast track to disgrace, exile, or sudden, career-ending decapitation. The social hierarchy is rigid, and every word has a weight. Speak above your class? You're being impudent. Criticize someone above you? You're insolent. Make a joke that doesn't land? That's treason adjacent. Even within families, you tread carefully. A son doesn't interrupt his father. A wife doesn't correct her husband. And no one, absolutely no one, questions the daimyo, unless they've always wanted to explore the afterlife via sword tip. Samurai are trained to speak with measured calm, even when furious. A sharp tongue is worse than a dull blade. It's unbecoming. It's dangerous, and it might force someone into the awkward position of having to kill you to restore their honor. Which brings us to apologies. In feudal Japan, apologies are an art form. You don't just say sorry. You bow. You grovel. You possibly write a poem about your shame. You might even send a gift, like a live bird or a decorative comb, while sincerely hoping the person receiving it doesn't decide to jewel you anyway. And gods help you if your tone is too casual. A misplaced word can be interpreted as sarcasm, defiance, or spiritual rot. Silence is almost always safer. Even humor is a tightrope walk. Laughing at the wrong thing could be seen as disrespect. Laughing with someone important might imply you think you're on their level. And that's how people end up mysteriously reassigned to the far north. So yes, you're technically free to speak, but in practice, you nod, smile, and pray your opinion never tries to escape your mouth. Because in feudal Japan, loose lips don't just sink ships. They sink social standing, reputations, and sometimes your entire bloodline. In feudal Japan, fashion isn't about self-expression. It's about making sure everyone knows exactly how far below them you are, just by looking at your sleeves. Your clothing doesn't reflect your personality. It reflects your position, your purpose, and whether or not you're legally allowed to carry a sword without getting tackled by a samurai. Let's start at the top. Samurai wear layers of silk robes, sometimes armored, always dignified. Their outfits are carefully arranged to signal status and readiness. The colors, deep blues, earthy browns, and the occasional blood-red flourish, are elegant, ominous, and almost always implying, "I have killed a man for less than a fashion faux pas." And of course, the swords. A samurai's daisho is more than a weapon set. It's a walking badge of authority. Drawing one in public is a last resort. Wearing them improperly is a first step toward being publicly corrected with extreme sharpness. Peasants, on the other hand, wear cotton and humility. Brown, gray, and beige dominate your wardrobe. It's not because they're minimalists. It's because dyed fabric costs money, and you're too busy surviving to worry about coordinating hues. Your outfit says, "Yes, I work in mud." "No, I didn't choose this lifestyle." "Yes, these are my only sandals." Merchants wear finer materials. They have money after all. But they're still socially ranked below samurai and peasants, so they keep it muted. Rich, but not too rich. Silk, yes, but subdued. Wealthy merchant families are experts at looking just respectable enough not to get noticed by a bored samurai on patrol. Women must strike a delicate balance between grace, obedience, and wearing 12 layers of folded symbolism. Hairstyles are coded. Kimono patterns are seasonal. And if you wear a color meant for a different festival, congratulations. You've just dishonored your entire household and possibly started a neighborhood whisper war. In short, what you wear isn't just about clothing. It's about rank, ritual, and surviving daily judgment from both heaven and your mother-in-law. So, you're imagining moonlit walks beneath cherry blossoms, whispered poetry under paper lanterns, perhaps a dramatic kiss between a samurai and a forbidden princess. Yeah. No. In feudal Japan, love is a side quest and not one you're likely to complete. Marriage isn't about feelings. It's about alliances, status, rice taxes, and not embarrassing your ancestors. If you're a peasant, your marriage is arranged by your parents and maybe the village headman. It's a transaction to ensure the fields are worked and the family line continues. If you're a samurai, your marriage is a political transaction. You're marrying a family, not a person. The reality is, you'll marry who you're told, obey whom you must, and thank the heavens if you're allowed to learn poetry. Feudal Japanese life. Imagine the paperwork. Every single aspect of your life, from where you lived to what you wore, was regulated. The sheer volume of edicts, decrees, and local ordinances was staggering. A peasant's life was a constant battle against a mountain of invisible, incomprehensible rules. For instance, the edict on the proper length of a peasant's hair tie, hypothetical, but historically plausible. The precise knot to be used, and the penalties for non-compliance, usually a fine in rice, which you didn't have. The sheer administrative effort required to maintain this level of social control is a comedy in itself. Let's return to the merchant. He has money but no respect. This leads to a profound existential crisis. He can buy the finest silk but he can't wear it. He can afford the best food, but he must eat it in private, lest a samurai see him indulging and decide that his wealth is an insult to the warrior class's austerity. His life is a performance of poverty. He must constantly downplay his success, drive a hard bargain in the market, and then go home to a house full of hidden luxuries. He is the ultimate hypocrite, forced to live a lie by a society that values the appearance of virtue over actual economic contribution. The samurai, meanwhile, had their own unique form of bureaucratic hell. While they didn't pay rice tax, they had to maintain detailed records of their service, their lineage, and their expenditures. Imagine having to justify your new katana purchase to your daimyo's accountant, who is also a master of the tea ceremony. Accountant: Lord Tanaka, I see here you purchased a new suba, sword guard. Was the previous one insufficiently wabi-sabi? Tanaka: No, it was a matter of honor. The reflection was slightly off-center, a subtle flaw that could have led to a moment of hesitation in battle. Accountant: A matter of honor, of course. Please submit a haiku detailing the existential dread caused by the off-center reflection. If the haiku is sufficiently profound, the expense will be approved. This is the level of absurd formality that permeated the warrior class. Everything was a matter of life, death, and poetry. The artisan, the ko, had a unique form of suffering, the pressure of perfection. Imagine being a master swordsmith. You spend months forging a blade, folding the steel 1,000 times, imbuing it with your very soul. The final product is a work of art, a deadly, beautiful masterpiece. Then, the samurai comes to inspect it. He doesn't look at the sharpness or the balance. He looks at the heimin, the temper line, and declares, "The curve suggests a slight spiritual imbalance. It is too eager." You are then expected to spend another 6 months trying to forge a blade that is perfectly balanced, spiritually serene, and yet still capable of cleaving a man in two. The artisan's life was a constant battle between the demands of their craft and the utterly subjective, often nonsensical, demands of their samurai patrons. Let's return to the peasant's goat problem mentioned earlier. It's not just a goat. It's the symbol of agricultural chaos. The goat is the ultimate anarchist in a society built on order. It eats the thatch off your roof. It walks across your bed mat, and it has an uncanny ability to find the exact spot where you buried your meager rice stash. The village headman, a man whose only real power is the ability to look slightly more constipated than everyone else, has to deal with the goat. But the goat belongs to the merchant's cousin, who is secretly protected by a low-ranking samurai who owes the merchant a favor. The peasant can't complain about the goat, because complaining about the goat is complaining about the merchant, which is complaining about the samurai, which is treason. So, the peasant's solution? He must build a better fence. He must spend his precious limited time and resources fighting a war against a single stubborn thatch-eating goat, all because the social hierarchy is too fragile to handle a simple property dispute. This is feudal Japan in a nutshell, a grand, elegant system brought to its knees by a single, determined farm animal. The fashion rules were not just about class. They were about season, occasion, and even age. Imagine the horror of a young woman wearing a pattern that was slightly too vibrant for her age group. This wasn't just a fashion mistake. It was a sign of a lack of self-awareness, a spiritual failing that could reflect poorly on her entire family's honor. The neighborhood whisper war that ensues is more brutal than any samurai duel. Did you see what Lady Chiyo wore to the Tanabata festival? The shade of green was clearly meant for a woman 2 years her senior.
The audacity!
Her family must be in utter disarray. The social stakes of a kimono pattern were higher than the stakes of a land battle. The tea ceremony, chanoyu, is often presented as the pinnacle of Japanese aesthetics. Quiet, serene, meditative. In reality, for the participants, it was a high-stakes, hour-long performance of existential dread. Imagine being a guest. You have to sit seiza on your knees for an hour. Your legs are screaming. You are desperately trying not to twitch, because twitching suggests a lack of inner calm, which is a sign of a flawed character. You have to admire the bowl, the ladle, the whisk, and the host's every movement with the appropriate level of reverence. Too much admiration? You're a sycophant. Too little? You're a bore, and then there's the tea itself. It's thick, bitter, and green. You have to drink it in exactly 3.5 sips, making a slight slurping sound on the last sip to show appreciation. If you take 4 sips, you've insulted the host's sense of proportion. If you don't slurp, you've implied the tea was not good enough to warrant an audible sign of pleasure. The entire ceremony is a masterclass in passive-aggressive social torture. We touched on the samurai's poetry requirement, but let's expand on the sheer volume of required artistic output. A samurai wasn't just expected to be a warrior. He was expected to be a Renaissance man who could kill you, and then write a moving 575-syllable poem about your death. Before battle, a haiku about the fleeting nature of life. After battle, a haiku about the honorable nature of the bloodshed. During a tea ceremony, a haiku about the quiet beauty of the steam. When submitting an expense report, a haiku about the necessity of a new pair of sandals. The pressure to be constantly profound was immense. Imagine having a creative block while facing a charging enemy. Wait, before I cleave you, I must find the perfect word for dewdrop. It was a life where the sword was only slightly more dangerous than the pen. The festivals were the peasants' only real break, but even they were fraught with peril. The goal was to get drunk enough on sake to forget your miserable life, but not so drunk that you accidentally insulted the local daimyo's banner, or worse, confessed your true feelings about the rice tax. The dancing was a carefully choreographed display of communal joy, designed to reinforce social bonds. But beneath the surface, it was a desperate attempt to burn off enough stress to survive the next planting season. The morning after a festival was a collective hangover of regret, where everyone quietly checked to see if they had committed any treasonous acts while under the influence. The bo, ojigi in feudal Japan was not a simple nod. It was a complex, highly regulated form of nonverbal communication. The angle of the bow was everything. 15 degrees, a casual greeting to a social equal. 30 degrees, a respectful greeting to a superior. 45 degrees, a deep, formal bow to a daimyo or a very important person. 90 degrees, dogezu, a full prostration, usually reserved for begging forgiveness for a massive screw-up or treason. Imagine the daily mental calculus. You see someone approaching. You have 3 seconds to assess their rank, their family's standing, their relationship to your lord, and the current political climate, all before executing the perfect, mathematically precise bow. A 30-degree bow to a 45-degree person? Insult. A 45-degree bow to a 30-degree person? Sycophancy. The entire society was run on a silent, constant fear of the wrong angle. Since the merchant couldn't show off his wealth publicly, he developed the art of the hidden flex. The inner lining. His outer kimono would be a drab, socially acceptable brown. But the inner lining? Pure, imported, outrageously expensive silk, visible only to his closest associates or when he made a subtle, dramatic gesture. The hidden garden. His house would look modest from the street, but the back would contain a meticulously manicured, impossibly expensive rock garden, a private oasis of wealth and taste. The tea bowl. While the samurai was busy admiring the cheap, rustic bowl, The merchant's own tea bowl would be a priceless antique. Used only in private, a silent testament to his superior, unacknowledged taste. The merchant's life was a constant, exhausting game of subtle one-upmanship, a secret war waged with expensive, hidden fabrics and perfectly placed stones. The peasant's life was defined by what they couldn't do. The list of forbidden items and activities was staggering. Forbidden, wearing silk. Forbidden, eating white rice, must be mixed with barley. Forbidden, owning a sword, obviously. Forbidden, leaving the village without a permit. Forbidden, building a house with a tiled roof, thatch only. Forbidden, complaining about the tax collector, see Chapter 4. Forbidden, singing a song that was too cheerful, suggests you are not suffering enough. The peasant's existence was a constant, low-level negotiation with the law, a life spent trying to avoid the next fine, the next whipping, the next promotion to corpse. There was no 401k for the samurai. Their retirement plan was simple: die honorably in battle or commit seppuku. If a samurai lived to old age, he faced a new kind of dishonor: irrelevance. An old samurai was a liability, a reminder of a bygone era. He would spend his final years writing endless, increasingly melancholic haikus about the fading cherry blossoms, hoping his lord would finally give him a quiet room and a short blade. The ultimate goal was not a peaceful death in bed, but a dramatic, final act of honor, preferably witnessed by a few people who would write a good report about it. The peasant's legacy was simple: more rice. Their entire life was dedicated to ensuring the next generation could suffer just as much, but with slightly more efficient farming techniques. They died knowing their children would inherit their debt, their mud, and their endless battle against the goat. Feudal Japan was a beautiful, brutal, and utterly absurd place. It was a society where a single sneeze could lead to ritual suicide, where a merchant's inner lining was more important than his outer robe, and where the most powerful people lived in constant fear of a fashion faux pas. It was elegant, poetic, and crushingly inescapable. And that, my friends, is the hilariously honest truth about a life lived under the shadow of the sword and the tyranny of the rice tax. The slurp at the end of the tea ceremony is not just a sound, it is a declaration. It is the final audible proof that you have appreciated the host's efforts. The slurp must be loud enough to be heard, but not so loud as to be vulgar. It must convey genuine pleasure, not forced enthusiasm. The pressure to execute the perfect slurp was immense. A poorly executed slurp could ruin the entire ceremony, implying that the host's aesthetic sensibilities were flawed. This single, tiny sound carried the weight of an entire social interaction. Even the simple act of eating was a minefield. Holding your chopsticks incorrectly was a sign of poor upbringing, a lack of discipline, and a subtle insult to the food itself. You could not point with them. You could not stick them upright in your rice bowl. That's for funerals. You could not pass food directly from your chopsticks to another person's. Also a funeral ritual. The daily meal was a silent, high-stakes test of your social fitness. Since you couldn't complain directly, you had to master the art of the non-treasonous complaint. This involved using highly metaphorical language, often in the form of a melancholy haiku or a subtle reference to a classical poem. Direct complaint: the rice tax is too high. Treason. Non-treasonous complaint: the moon's reflection on the empty field is a sorrowful sight, suggesting a lack of harvest. Profoundly melancholy, but safe. The ability to complain without being executed was the highest form of verbal artistry. The samurai's sandals, waraji, were a constant source of anxiety. They had to be perfectly tied, perfectly clean, and perfectly maintained. A loose thong could cause a stumble, which could lead to a moment of hesitation, which could lead to death, which would be dishonorable. The simple act of putting on sandals was a ritual of preparation for death. The merchant's hidden silk lining was more than just a fashion statement. It was an act of quiet rebellion. It was a silent, daily reminder that the social order was a lie, that money, not birth, was the true source of power. Every time he subtly flashed the silk, he was committing a tiny, beautiful act of treason against the rigid, unyielding system.